the confidence to make decisions under pressure comes from having made decisions in the past. And just sort of relying on, knowing that you can rely on your presence of mind in that moment. And it all just comes from experience, I think. So, yeah, interesting question. I think my leadership style started with probably a dictatorship, where I worked out that, people would do what you ask them to do when you get given leadership role. And this is very young, when I was 12 or 13 and I was in the Air Cadets. And, I sort of had my train set to play with. And then you obviously work out that that's not really what leadership is. But I think you sort of have to, I'd certainly had to work that out by practicing it and getting it wrong and realizing that people don't really respond to that. So I think now it's gone much more into influence and much more stepping back and creating the conditions. I think to start with, you feel like you have to have all the answers and be very directive. And I think there's a time and a place for that. But also, as I've sort of matured and learnt more about it, I've learnt that actually sometimes it's just about creating the space for people to find their own answers and having the confidence that that's also leadership. So that's a great question. And a lot of organizations ask about this, how do we lead through transformation? How do we lead through change? I think there's a couple of really important things to think about here. Number one is, if you, let's just say, your partner, or someone that you deeply respect, put a cup of tea in your hand and they said, we need to talk, something's got to change. What would your immediate go-to thought be? Because I know what I'd be thinking. I'd be thinking, oh my goodness, what have I done wrong? So I think it's important to recognize that when we're leading through change, that's where people's brains go. They either think I must have done something wrong or I'm being set up to fail in the past. So actually, I think a lot of it is about teaching people to have a different mindset about failure, because it's part of the journey. I think that's one part. I think the other part is when change is done too, we don't really like being told what to do. And I did 21 years in the military where you literally tell people what to do, and I can tell you that they still don't like it. So I think the key is creating a sense of agency. So where you can, giving people the ability to collaborate, to co-create the transformation plan. And if they can't do that, then the ability to challenge it. And if they can't do that, then at the very least, explaining why they are an integral part of the plan and articulating what their contribution is. So I put that down to 3 C's, which is collaboration, challenge, and contribution. Those are the ways I think that can really help to increase people's engagement when they go through transformation. So I attribute a lot of this down to my upbringing, my childhood. It did all start with the movie Top Gun. I'm not ashamed to say, when I watched the film and I thought, that is what I'm going to do. And as you are when you're 12, you don't question it. But neither did anybody else, actually. My parents, my teachers, they said, absolutely, we can kind of see you being a fighter pilot. So I went off and joined the Air Cadets, and that gives you an early exposure to leadership. And then I was, prefect at school. So I think part of it was just that nobody put the idea in my head that I couldn't. And actually, when you're sort of that kind of age, we don't have those limiting beliefs that we all learn to have when we get older. So I think that helped. And also just getting out there and doing it. Inevitably, you have to test and adjust, you get some things wrong. But the more you do it, the less frightening something is. So I think early exposure and then just keeping learning, I think that really helped. I think that the more we make decisions, the easier it gets. The more we do anything, the easier it gets. And I remember being really struck by something Brené Brown said in one of her many brilliant books, where she said that gut instinct is actually just your subconscious brain rapidly scanning through a library of relevant experiences and pulling out something that will give you the answer. So really what that means is instinct isn't something that you sort of just feel. I mean, it is, but the reason you feel it is because it's based on experience. In other words, it's still based on evidence. So I think you have to create the evidence. which means you go out there and you make decisions and then you learn from them and you work out how you might have done it differently next time. But ultimately, I think the confidence to make decisions under pressure comes from having made decisions in the past, and just sort of relying on, knowing that you can rely on your presence of mind in that moment. And it all just comes from experience, I think. So obviously, when you start out, that's a daunting prospect. But all I can say is it gets easier the more you do it. So I definitely used to think that there were some people that were just tougher than others, and I definitely thought I was one of the tougher ones. And I think when you get to my age, or I'm not saying you have to wait until this point, but generally life doesn't run smooth, and at some point something will happen that will make you wake up and realize that everybody's breakable. And that, I don't say that with any pride. So I think what I learned is that resilience isn't a mark of your character. It's down to the resources that you have to deal with whatever life throws at you. But also it's down to the training as well. I really do think we can train ourselves to be more resilient. And that's something I learned in the military. Part of it is just by leaning into discomfort. In the military, we spend a lot of time being uncomfortable. Usually that means being cold, wet, and hungry. But it teaches you that being uncomfortable won't kill you. And that's an amazing confidence to have when you go through any kind of adversity. And I think it really helps you to feel resilient. But we had that because we'd been through these experiences, and you'll be probably picking up on a trend here. A lot of this just comes from kind of doing the training and the experience. So yeah, I think the biggest myth about resilience is that it's something you have or you don't. I think it's absolutely all to play for. I think you can train yourself to be more resilient. And I also think that the resources that you have will make a big difference in how you deal with what life throws at you.